There's a great story. Really one of my favorite stories. I think it's a meaningful story. The story was published in a magazine when a Yid died. There was a Yid who lived in Crown Heights. We knew him sort of. Very, very fine man. And he passed away relatively young, Nebuch. So they wrote an expose on him. They wrote a biography. They wrote about him. And it began with this story. There was a Hasidic group that had a tradition that the Hasidim, when they would be by the Rebbe, would push. Certain Hasidic groups had a philosophy and a culture that was, you should be comfortable. Everybody should have enough room, there should be enough seats, and everyone should sit in their place. Even the young adults, even the Bachrim had seats. Other Hasidim believed that it was important that Hasidim should push. Part of the purging, part of the spiritual cleansing was going to the Rebbe and using your energy. So there was a particular Hasidus where this tradition of pushing was prevalent, and the Chassidim, especially the younger ones, would come and they would push to be near the Rebbe. The Rebbe passes away, and he is succeeded by his son, who after a short time made an announcement, no more pushing. There's going to be seats for everybody. You come and take a seat, don't push. And that's what happened. And some of the Chassidim felt that something was missing. So much of the Chassidus was about that. You came out of your Rebbe washed out, you had to dry up afterwards, but you came out, like went to a washing machine, and now Nebuch, everyone was sitting comfortably, they all had seats, and they could see and hear, and so on. So one of the elder Chassidim said to the Rebbe, the tradition in this Chassidus is the Chassidim push, and you've deprived us of this. Why did you do it? You're sitting on your father's seat, you're succeeding your father, and you've changed the tradition that your father had instituted, or had continued from his father. So he says, I'll tell you the truth, he says. By my father, Hasidim used to push. By me, the Hasidim pushed. But there was a difference. By my father, I saw that the Hasidim, when they pushed, they were squeezing themselves. By me, I noticed as the Hasidim push, they're squeezing the people around them. I don't need that. In other words, when a group of people are standing together and they're squeezing themselves to be close to a tzaddik, sometimes you're squeezing yourself. And on occasion, you're just getting everybody out of the way. The difference in external appearance is probably very small. How do you know when someone is pushing, if he's pushing himself? Of course, when there's a group of people and you push, so people get displaced, versus pushing to get other people out of the way. It's a subtlety. One is a hispashtus agashmius. One is you're spreading yourself out. And the other really is hafshatas agashmius, where you're going past yourself. Bittul. And to push properly, you have to be a mensch beforehand. You don't become a mensch from the pushing. For the pushing, ugliness could come out. Unless you're a beautiful person to start with. So the pushing brings out this beauty further. The class of tonight is about this idea of squeezing ourselves. The concept of squeezing ourselves has a precedent in the Tanya. It was discussed in chapter 27, Chav Zayin, which is probably, 8 months ago, where we have the classic discussion on iskafia. The translation of the word iskafia means to bend yourself. And the basic concept of iskafia is to do a little bit more than you're comfortable with. We all have a standard. We all have a space. We all have a comfort zone. Our comfort zones could be quite high. My comfort zone could involve a very high standard of learning and davening and kindness to others. Iskafia means a little more than that. Squeeze yourself. And of course, as we grow, as we mature, as we develop, yesterday's squeezing is today's comfort zone, so you need a new iskafia. The point is that in our lives, there has to be an aspect where we're squeezing ourselves. At the time, I gave you a mashal. Then, when we did chapter 27, I gave you a mashal. In halacha, Jewish law, there's what's called lamites malachas, right? Avos malachas aboim chasarachas. There are 39 things you're not allowed to do on Shabbos. Most of the things you're not allowed to do on Shabbos, as the Gemara says, the Lashon, Hay dehava b'mishkan chashivi. All the things that they did in building the Beis HaMikdash are distinctive malachas, are separate things you're not allowed to do on Shabbos. There's a few of them that are considered strange, weird, because they're not exactly solid malachas. The examples that the Gemara brings is carrying, hitzah, it's called a malacha kalila. When you carry something, you're not changing anything, you're just moving it from one place to another. It's a malacha. Lighting a fire, some people say it's only a lav. And one of the malachas, which is sort of a funny one, it's very hard to figure it out, it's called makah b'patish. Makah b'patish literally means to bang a hammer. The concept of makah b'patish means you're not allowed to finish anything on Shabbos. If you start something before Shabbos and you're almost done, completing it on Shabbos is a malacha. You're not allowed to do it. Even if what you're doing is so insignificant and by itself it doesn't have much meaning, because it's finishing something, it becomes asur. For example, when people made utensils, vessels, pots in the olden days, whether they made them from clay or they made them from metal or iron, so there's a process by which you have to melt it down. You put it into a kiln, into a special oven, and it bakes at a very high temperature. Then you take it out and you cool it. And after it's cooled, you smash it with a hammer. This clap, somehow, I don't know anything about making pots. It's one of the few things I have no experience at. It somehow settles. It sets the material so that it should be hard and it should have toughness. And so the person made a pot before Shabbos, and he cooled it, and then the sun went down, it was shkia, and he bangs the pot with a hammer. What's he done? He's done nothing. It's a skila. Not allowed to do it. Not because of what you did, but because of what you accomplished. It's a usual malacha. Makah b'patish is one of those things which keeps brainos very busy, because all the rabbis argue. So many different things can go either into the category of a different malacha, whether it's makah b'patish or it's something else. It drives you crazy, makah b'patish. One of the examples that's brought from makah b'patish is what's called making wicks. People make wicks. How do you make a wick? You take a little cotton and you roll it. The reality was, during the golden age of wicks, right? Today we call them light bulbs, but at the times that people were, wicks were important, you would roll the cotton, prepare the wick, and then you would burn the edge. You would burn the tip. You would blacken the tip. When the tip was blackened, it was a wick. Before the tip was blackened, it was a piece of cotton. So burning the edge of a wick is considered makah b'patish. This is not a class in Hilchas Shabbos, it's not a class on Lomdus. B'chlal, burning something should not be a malacha, because burning is destroying, and malachas have to be building. So burning the edge of a wick is actually the beginning of the end for that wick, because then you're going to use it, then it's going to eventually disappear. But you're not allowed to do it on Shabbos. Why? Because now it's a wick.
You created it.
Okay, the particulars, you'll ask your local rabbi, and it's very involved in it. Why? Because the nature of the wick is that in order for the fire to catch more easily, you need to have that blackness. A white piece of cotton that you light takes a little longer. If it's been blackened before, it burns easier. There's a tradition in many Jewish communities that the husband will set up, I don't want to start up here, familial politics here, will set up the Shabbos candles, and he will light the candles and blow them out. Because it's easier for the wife to then relight the candles. I saw from the Rebbe that this is not our custom, but in many communities it's a very beautiful part of Erev Shabbos. You prepare the candles, you light each candle and you blow it out, however you blow it out, so then when it comes to actually candle lighting time, you're lighting a candle that's already been lit, it burned, it catches easier. This is the mashal. And the nimshal is, the point is, that the place where fire, which means Hashem, godliness, holiness, meets the wick, which is the person, is where it's black. The part of our lives where we are currently struggling spiritually is the place where we're alive. Not everything is always a struggle. I don't have a problem with shrimp. Why? I've never tasted shrimp. There's no appeal to me. I have problems with other things, and that I'm not going to tell you because I don't want to lose my job. But we all have struggles with different things. The part of our life where we struggle, when we win, it's not only that aspect of our life is successful, it defines our whole identity. That milchama makes it, even the things that we do well, and we do efficiently, and we do consistently, and we even get pleasure from it, they're alive because of the part of our lives that we are struggling about. And that's the concept of iskafia. In the Gemara, it's called ma'at yossi megilosei, a little more than you're comfortable with, in Tanya chapter 15. And then in Tanya chapter 30, there's a whole different idea, which is called harbe yossi megilosei, a lot more than you're comfortable with. But this is what iskafia is about. Iskafia has different aspects. Iskafia b'dvarim ha'asurim, fighting with Yetzer Hara. Yetzer Hara wants us to do certain things, and we really would love to be able to do it, but Hashem says no. And then there is the fight, what's called dvarim ha'mutarim. It's not even a sin. It's just an indulgence. And this is called squeezing ourselves. The point of squeezing ourselves is not to make ourselves depressed. It's not to make ourselves feel pious and holy. It's to make ourselves feel alive as Jews. There's a great story. It's a very involved story. There was a chassid named Hillel Paltiel, very, very special chassid, who he originally had been a Chernobyl chassid. And then later on in his life, he became a Lubavitcher chassid. He learned the Tanya, and the Tanya appealed to him. The avoid of the Tanya worked for him. So he came to Lubavitch. He was a tzaddik. The Talmud tzaddik was a tzaddik from Tanya. He was a very big Baal Madrega of Hillel. And he was incredibly frum. Frum to the point of insanity. Every imaginable chumrah he was particular about. So there was a story once where a group of Hasidim had a Likutei Fabrengen. Likutei is very short, is very close to us now. And it happened that the day before Likutei was a fast of Bahab. The particulars are not important. And all the Rabbanim who came to this Likutei Fabrengen got together, that they paskened that all those who were fasting should be mata neder, should release their vow, and they should wash and eat a feast because the Hilula of the Rashbi, because of the fast, the Yarchat of Rashbi, Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, and not finish the fast. And they all did. They all were mata neder, and they davened mincha, and they washed, they sat down to the meal. Rabbi Hillel Parasha didn't. He finished his fast. After Ma'ariv, they were already in the middle of the meal, he came and he washed. One of the Hasidim at that Fabrengen was much older than Rabbi Hillel. Much older. He could have been Rabbi Hillel's father. And he felt that Rabbi Hillel Parasha was getting a little carried away. This was not religion, this was self-absorption or fear. There's a difference between frum. So this Elter Chassid says to Rabbi Hillel, with all due respect, you've gotten carried away. You're not frum, you're meshugah. So Rabbi Hillel started to cry. And this is what the previous Rebbe tells the story. And he repeated to the group his personal struggle, his avodas Hashem struggle. You're talking about a big Baal Madrega. He didn't have shrimp issues. Or even the I don't want to tell you issues. He was a different person. But he had nevertheless struggles. He wanted God. We all want God. He wanted God and he had a relationship with Eibishter. And that was his struggle in his world, in his Madrega. And he finished telling him his life story with this statement. He said, believe me, all my frumkeit is that I should understand Chassidus a little better. All my devoutness, my preciseness in the performance of mitzvahs, it's leading to something. In other words, you have to be frum, but to be farfrumt, to be extreme, it can be completely disconnected from the Eibishter. Mamish. He says, it's about light. I am so religious, I'm so particular because I want light. I want light. The light is Hasidus. But the light of Hasidus has to touch and enlighten me. And this is my wick. This is my blackening of the tip of the wick. The light of Hasidus should reach me. It's a very profound story. Because the Iskafia has an end. I'm not just breaking myself. I'm breaking myself so I should be something else. I should be raised up to a higher madrig. So we've already had a discussion on the skafia earlier in the Tanya. Here in chapter 49, we have a second discussion on the skafia. This discussion on the skafia, if you were here last week and the week before, is based on the principle of two things: gratitude and reciprocity. Gratitude means if someone likes you, you should like them back. And reciprocity means when somebody does a good thing to you, you should do the similar good thing to them. So the Alter Rebbe explained, think about the Eibishter's favoritism for the Jewish people. He loves us. For what reason? What did we do? Mi anachnu, ma anachnu. Forget about us versus other human beings. There's malachim, there's netzolim al yoinim, there's incredibly lofty, spiritual beings that are, whose whole identity is intimacy with God, and he's busy with a couple of earthlings, with yetzaharas and moods and attitudes and so on and so forth. Alpha became, whether we understand it or not, the Eibishter says, he singles us out, he's made us his nation. And Alter Rebbe says, when you think about the favoritism Hashem has shown us, we have a debt that we can't possibly pay back. He loves us, we don't deserve to be loved. It's not because of ourselves that the Eibishter has said, I have chosen you. And we all, I hope we're all willing to admit that. I'm prepared to admit that in a heartbeat. So when you appreciate the fact that the Eibishter has shown us such favoritism, there's a certain expectation of gratitude, of hakaras hatov. But specifically, we learned last week the mystical side of this. This whole process by which the Eibishter shows us this favoritism is rooted in quotes, in Hashem squeezing himself, end quote. What is required for Hashem to favor us? The simple answer to the question is for us to exist. What is required for us to exist? And the simple answer to that question is Hashem has to hide. Because our physical identity as such, as physical beings, and the presence of God, and very specifically, or more specifically, the light of God are in complete conflict. Creation is about Hashem hiding himself. How much of himself has Hashem hidden? Enough to create an environment where beings like us can exist. Like it's discussed in Tanya in various places. What's the trademark of this creation? The trademark of this creation is that you can deny God altogether. Because there is no direct evidence of his presence. This is called in Chassidus Yesh Mayayin. The Eibishter created a world where you have no proof, no direct proof for his involvement in the world. So if you want to know who's responsible for atheism, the answer is the creator of the world. He hides. It's one of the Eibishter's capabilities, as I explained to you last week at length. It's as magical for God to hide as it is for God to show himself. Well, the magic of concealment is so comprehensive, it's so thorough, it's so complete, that you can deny him altogether. And the Eibishter did this, and there should be space for one very, very ordinary being called a human being, a Yid. And the Eibishter says it's about you. There's a lashon from the Rebbe Nishmas Eden. I spent a long time trying to find it and I couldn't. But the Rebbe Rashab said, think of it, look at this. This is a physical body. Wie getlachat hat man gegossen von dem Guf. He pointed at his hand. He says, how much godliness was spilled, was expended in a less than efficient way for the physical body. As little sense as this makes, the Jewish religion says Hashem wants physical people to serve him on a physical planet. We all know the souls were once in a better place. We all know that the souls will return to a better place. But that's not what it's about. It's about here. In the classic language of Chabad, it's tachtonim. It's what happens in the lowest realm. The struggles that we fight on the most basic plane. The Alter Rebbe brings a mashal in the end of Yom Tshuva, in the end of his letter on Tshuva, that he gives an example from a shadow. When a shadow moves an inch, how much has the sun traveled in the sky? Millions of miles. So he says, when a Yid does a tiny act down here, it's reflected on high, the equivalent to the sun having traveled over the course of millions of miles of sky, of space. In other words, we're doing such small things. They are to Hashem very valuable, not because they're valuable, but because He's chosen to give them a value. So there is a hakaras hatev, there's a debt of gratitude, and there's also an inyan of reciprocity, of giving back to God what God has given us. And what has God given us? He has, in quotes, squeezed Himself, end quote, so that we should be. Says the Alter Rebbe, what we owe Him is that we should squeeze ourselves reciprocally in return. So we're essentially having, again, a discussion on a skafia, squeezing yourself. But here, the issue is really love for God and gratitude. In chapter 27, we talked about a skafia, because in that particular context, the issue was to explain the Yetzer Hara. One of the great complaints that we all have is, I was born with a Yetzer Hara, but God, at least let me kill him 1 minute before I die. And God says, no, he's going to go with you to the grave. Yeah. So what do we give him? We give him a typical teenage argument. It's not fair. And God is saying, when I gave you your purpose, I didn't call together the fairness committee. The fairness doctrine had not yet been written, and B'chlal, Hashem is not into fairness. He's into whatever He wants. And that's the way it is. So the Alter Rebbe explained in chapter 27 that the Yetzer Hara is all about a skafia and the reward of a skafia. It's a long story, it's not for now. Tonight we're going to have a similar conversation. But the context is, the Eibishter is saying, we should push ourselves to be Yidden. We should push ourselves to be Yidden, considering what we owe HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the idea is the same. The motivation is different. The whole point of chapters 46, 47, 48, and 49, which we're finishing tonight, is to say, Kamayim aponim leponim can lev adam al. As water reflects a face, a heart reflects a heart. You look into water, you see an image of yourself. When you love somebody, they have to love you back. The Eibishter loves us, we have to love Him back. And we should love Him back in kind. He squeezes Himself for us, we should squeeze ourselves for Him. This is the essence. This is the essence of the conversation. I just want to tell you something interesting. This is just as a avertel. Take it or leave it. My brother-in-law brought home a few years ago, I don't have access to the internet, which may come as a surprise to you, because I have a website, but I don't have access to the internet, and I thank God I don't. But my brother-in-law, they found on the web a clip of the Mechsalode, of the Munkacher, from before the war. The Chaim from Munkacher, she passed away, I believe, in 1937. He was a big tzaddik and a very big gon, and the Lubavitcher Rabbeim held very highly of him. Our Rebbe had certain customs that he did different than his father-in-law, the previous Rebbe, because he was imitating the Munkacher. That's the extent. You imagine the Rebbe should do different than his Shved at Nachgemach the Munkacher. The Rebbe had incredible esteem for the Munkacher Rebbe, the Mechsel Lozer. So he had one daughter. He never had any sons. He had one daughter. And they have a film of her chasana. I'm sorry? Yeah. You see how exhausted the man is. I mean, he probably was in his early 60s. You see the man is, he's conflicted. You see he's exhausted. And he makes this speech. Apparently there was an American company that was making this film to show in America. So during the course, it's very short. It's a few minutes. He makes a little speech, and then you see them going to the chuppah, and you can't really see it. You just see hats, And he makes this little speech, which was directed towards American Jewry. And the gist of his talk was, Taya Brida in America, heed them Heilig and Shabbos. The Munkacher was a very interesting person. He was a kanoi. He was a big zealot. He says, Jews in America, you have to keep Shabbos. Me can heat them Heilig and Shabbos. You can't keep Shabbos in America. And he says it with a lot of passion, with a lot of hearts. Well, guess what? It was very difficult to keep Shabbos in America. It was very difficult. My mother's family has been in this country for over 100 years. My grandfather tells me his father used to lose his job every Friday. It was a 6-day work week. You weren't going to work Shabbos, they fired you. That was it. Don't come back Monday. And the Munkacher is screaming, "We can eat in the Heilige Shabbos." The Munkacher wasn't a fool. He didn't have his head in the sand or in the clouds. He knew exactly how difficult it was to keep Shabbos. And when he says, "We can eat in the Heilige Shabbos in America," he wasn't saying it's easy. He was saying it's important. Important enough that as difficult as it is, you figure out how to do it. I shared with you this story on a previous occasion. There were a whole group of Lubavitcher Hasidim who came out of Russia in the early 1970s, 1971, 72. Some of them were very special. They lived in Russia, Soviet Russia, for all these years. Some of them were very big Talmidei Chachamim, Chassidim. So when they came to New York, the Rebbe paid for them to come for Tishrei. The Rebbe arranged that the whole group of them should go meet Rebbe Moshe Feinstein, he was the Gadol, the Pesach in New York. He was a Litvak, but the Moshe Feinstein was a Russian Jew. The Moshe Feinstein himself lived the Soviet Russia. He knew exactly what these Jews were living. And Rabbi Chadakov, the Rebbe's personal secretary, went with them to the Moshe to introduce them. And it was a very warm, Rabbi Moshe Feinstein had very warm feelings to Russia, to the Rebbe, to Chassidus. He was he loved the Rebbe, he had respect for the Rebbe. But he was very moved. A whole bunch of Russian Jews who had spent, he left Russia in the 30s. You're talking about the early 70s. They lived all those years. They survived Stalin and then the rest. So they came and they were introduced. It was very moving. Each one of them was introduced. Rabbi Chadakov was told by the Rebbe personally how he should introduce them to Rabbi Moshe. One of them he introduced to Rabbi Moshe Feinstein as a baki in all of the Igris Moshe, Shal Shuvas Igris Moshe, the Moshe's own literature. How we got it in Russia was itself a miracle. When this was all over, Rabbi Moshe Feinstein asked them, how did you stay frum in Russia? So one of them told him, we fabreng, Chassidim get together, you have fabrengens, and we encourage each other. Another one told Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, Abreidet men gehat. You had a choice. You live in Russia, you had to keep. Rabbi Moshe was very moved by this. A person living in Soviet Russia, where for Shabbos you have no panos. If you want to raise frum kids, they're going to take them away from you. For kosher, everything had a price tag, very high. And the Moshe Feinstein says to a Yid, how do you stay frum in Russia? His answer is, what choice do we have? Where does that come from? That comes from an assumption. The assumption is, a Yid darf man sein. You have to be a Jew. Now you got to figure out how. And this is what the Michshaloza was saying to the American Jews. You could keep Shabbos in America. It wasn't like he was a fool. He knew good and well what it means not to have work, to keep Shabbos, to suffer, and to be... In those days, there wasn't respect for frum Jews. If you were a frum Jew, you were looked at as a lower class. By Jews, I'm talking, not by Goyim. By Jews who themselves came from the old country, who had seen Yiddishkeit. It was like, passé. And this is what the Alter Rebbe is saying. We owe the Eibishter to squeeze ourselves and to be Yidden. That's the message. We owe Hashem, if we appreciate what's going on in this world, and we appreciate the fact that the Eibishter is the creator of this world, and he has created an environment where he is, for all intents and purposes, not revealed. So that we should have space. In other words, he's squeezing himself. Our response has to be, we can squeeze ourselves. If you know Jewish history, Jews have had periods when to be frum, you had to squeeze yourself to the point of martyrdom, mamish. Es ist gewähnt Zeiten, wenn sie gewähnt sehr schmal. Time to learn Yiddish. There were times when being a Jew was incredibly taxing. The Soviet Russia is an example. The Gemara speaks about Sheker Achein v'hevel yef isha yeres Hashem hitas halo. Right? The dead of Moshe Rabbi, the dead of Yeshua, Sheker Achein v'hevel yef. Isha yeres Hashem hitas halo is data shel shmad. There have been periods of time in Spain, other places, where to be a Jew you had to be prepared to give your life, mamish. And Yidden gave their lives. They squeezed themselves. We live in America, Baruch Hashem, and no one's asking us for martyrdom.
Yes.
Squeezing. Ironically, in this world, where, to be honest, Jews have never had it better. Forget about Jews never had it better. Human beings have never had it better. I'm giving this lecture before. There was a scientist who did a whole study and came to the conclusion that the best time in the history of humankind to be alive is right now. So I came to my class and I repeated to one of my students, and she gave me an argument and explained to me how terrible it is. Why? Because she heard from a professor that it's terrible. What's terrible? What's terrible? They were killing whales. So I explained to her, do you realize that your grandfather couldn't even think about whales? He was busy trying to feed himself. You know what kind of luxury it is to worry about killing whales? And about the environment. We're living in such a... The things that are no good are in different generations. Who had time to worry about global warming? These are all luxuries. But we have this incredible need to look at the world in a negative way. Somehow we feel that makes us sophisticated. And it's the antithesis of religion. The religion is about believing in goodness. Of man, of God, and of his world. Not good things happen. But that's not reality. Those are challenges. Reality is good.
I like this class.
And yet, like I said to you, it's conceivable that we have a difficulty with this. And this is the message of the class. In our modern world, with our inundation of information and materialism and distraction, says the Alter Rebbe, squeeze yourself. Maybe he squeezes himself, or us, we should squeeze ourselves. What does squeezing mean? A little more than we're comfortable. And as soon as we become comfortable with that little more, we squeeze ourselves a little more. We pay the Eibishter for his tzimtzum with a tzimtzum of our own. That's the message. The Alter Rebbe quotes the pasuk, and let me set it up for you. One of the most important prayers or passages that we recite daily, twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, is Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Translate, Shema, it doesn't mean hero, by the way, as you all know. Shema means pay attention. Trag sich zu. Listen to yourself. Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Our God is one. Our God is one means everything I see is part of that unity. Everybody I know is part of the whole creation is one because there's one, not just creator, but one master. It's so to speak, it is the essence of Jewish belief that there's a master to this world. There's unity to this world. And Yit says, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. So in some place else in the Tanya, the Alter Rebbe describes it. What do you do when you say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad? You conveniently close your eyes. With your eyes closed, there's only God. Then the Alter Rebbe says, you open up your eyes, the world reappears, and God vanishes. Right? That would be terrible. But it happens to some people some of the time. Of course, everybody who comes to this class is perfect, otherwise they wouldn't be here. So it's them, those people outside. You close your eyes, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Besides for God, there's nothing. Then you open up your eyes, God disappears, and the world reappears. It's a joke. You don't close your eyes so you should be able to say Hashem Echad because you can't see anything. You close your eyes, you should concentrate. But when you open your eyes and you see your world, it's still true Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. And that's why you follow up Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad with the Yohavta. We're going to love Hashem. We're going to be grateful to Hashem. And we're going to give back the love. Kamayim aponim leponim ken leiv adam l'adam. As He loves us, we're going to love Him. B'chol levavcho, b'chol nafshcho, b'chol meidachcho. With all our heart, with all of our soul, and with all of our might. Translates the Alter Rebbe. What is your whole heart? What you love. What do you love most?
Yourself.
Yourself, your family, your money. You're not sacrificing them, chas v'sholem, but you're squeezing. You're saying, all of the things closest to my heart, I have to give HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And you give it to HaKadosh Baruch Hu by squeezing myself a little bit. You don't have to squeeze your kids, you can squeeze yourself. But the message is, I said, to me, Shema Yisrael means listen Yossel. It doesn't mean listen Israel, because my name is not Israel. What is your name? Tzvi. So Shema Yisrael means listen Tzvi. That's what it means. What is your name, the Hebrew name? Yehuda. Shema Yisrael means pay attention, Yehuda, and Meir, and so on. I have to listen to what I'm saying. And what is the proof that I'm listening to what I'm saying is that I follow up the declaration of unity with V'yahavta, with a love, with a gift to Hashem of squeezing self. B'chol levavcha means you give the Eibishter the things that you love, your money, your material possessions. And in today's day and age, we're not talking about martyrdom, we're not talking about life and death. We're talking about Poshet. It shouldn't only be about our Narish Zachen. It should be about Hashem has to be more important than our nonsense. And if we don't have that capacity, we're cheating ourselves. Forget about cheating Hashem. We're cheating ourselves. We're living such a cheap Yiddishkeit. You want to be a Yid? Yiddishkeit matters more than a vacation. Yiddishkeit matters more than material things. Yiddishkeit matters more. We have to have the vacation and the material things and the luxuries, but there's got to be priorities. And v'yahavta b'chol levavcha means that I love Hashem with all the things that I love. I squeeze the things that I love materially and so forth in my recognition of Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. And b'chol nafshecha means health. No one's talking about getting sick, but you don't have to be overly preoccupied with taking care of yourself. Squeeze a little bit, take some of you and give it to the Eibshter. And what's b'chol meidecha? Your wallet, your pocketbook. That's what b'chol meidecha means. You have to squeeze yourself in these different ways. The things that I love, and like you said, the thing I love most of all myself. And my wallet, the sign that the unity of God is true, is that I reciprocate Hashem's law with a love of my own. I reciprocate Hashem squeezing Himself to allow me to be by squeezing myself in the areas of lavavcha nafsha medecha. Lavavcha means those things that I love, which He translates means family. Chol nafsha means the thing that I love more than anything else, my own life, my own health. And b'chol medecha means money. And then the Alter Rebbe says something very beautiful and very important. And I'd like to give you a little background in setting the stage for this concept. We have a prayer book, a siddur. The prayer book is very old. The prayer book is older than the Mishnah of the Gemara. The prayer book at its core is older than the Talmud. The prayer book was written by the Anshe Knesset Hagedol, the members of the Great Assembly, who lived about 2,400 years ago. Maybe a little bit more. A long time ago. And the prayer book was written instead of Karbonis. The prayer book was written because people no longer spoke a pure Hebrew and they wanted that the language of prayer should be a lucid, single language, and so on and so forth. Okay? But the prayer book has evolved. The original prayer book was a pamphlet. The current prayer book is a bookcase. The original prayer book was essentially the Amidah, the 19 brachas of the Shemona Esrei, and that's it. And then there were a few other brachas that the Anshe Knesset Hagedol threw in. But the prayer book has expanded. Additionally, over the course of time, different areas of prayer were joined. For example, when we daven nowadays, you start on page 1, you go to page 96, whatever it is, 84. It's a whole bunch of stuff. What we're doing in that continuum of pages is 3 or 4 separate ideas of prayer that at one point were completely dissociated. They were converged over the course of time into an extended morning prayer. The blessings in the morning were not part of the prayer, not part of davening. You open your eyes, you get out of bed and you stand up, you say Matar Asurim. You put on your clothing, you say Mal B'Sharubim. Now you come to shul and you read the brachas. Then there's something called Psukei de Zimra, where you have to sing the praises of Hashem, and you say a blessing before and blessing after. Then you have to say Shema, there's blessings before and after that, and then there's the Shemona Esrei. The prayer book has evolved. And what's happened in the course of this evolution is that it has considerably expanded. It's gotten bigger. Now, this is not just torture, The kids will say, the rabbis we were liking the prayers a little too much. Let's add a couple more pages and everyone should be miserable. The prayer book was expanded for a simple reason. And that reason is that prayer is supposed to work. Prayer is supposed to work means that before I daven, I'm supposed to be far away from God. And after I daven, I'm supposed to be considerably closer to Him. Consciously, emotionally, right? Right? What's the problem with God? We cannot see Him. What's the problem with God? He's not human. We have no relationship with God. Yiddishkeit insists, have a personal connection to God. How can you have a personal connection to God? Everybody's reading the same Hebrew text and they don't even speak the language. It's a good question and it deserves an answer. And part of the answer is, stop doing what everybody else is doing. Daven! You have to say the words. I don't want to misunderstand. But davening is not only the words, it's develop a relationship with God. And the structure of the prayer book was designed to be a vehicle by which we develop a relationship with God. Unfortunately, there are many people who believe that their biggest obstacle to God is the prayer book itself. I understand they're wrong. Because it's not the prayer book, it's they're using the prayer book. The way they take advantage or don't take advantage of the Siddur is the obstacle. But the design of tefillah is, as it's described in the pasuk, a ladder which stands on the ground and the head reaches up into the heavens and you climb one rung at a time. The design of davening is to get you from here to there, which means simply, I begin my davening cold, neshama biyape, with very little conscious relation with the Eibishter. I want to finish my prayer being on fire, being engaged, being involved. If it doesn't happen, so I've said the words, I've paid my bills, I've done my duty, but I haven't davened. As Chassidus says, tefillah is not just bakashas tzrachav, giving God, as one of my students told me tonight, my laundry list of needs. But it's haloshen hatefak lecheres, to connect to Kadosh Baruch Hu. Avoid shebelev, the labor of the heart. My heart should touch the heart of God, or God should touch my heart. For this to transpire, I have to daven. And the Siddur was constructed as a tool to effect this, not as an obstacle to it, but as the vehicle to it. And as you study in Kabbalah and in Hasidus, davening has 4 rungs. And I don't want to go into all 4 rungs. We're going to speak only about one tonight. The first rung is Heidah, is submission, acceptance. I submit, I recognize, I accept on faith. The second is the engagement of the heart, to focus on God's gifts to us that are physical. The gift of life, the gift of health, the gift of security, the gift of provisions. So many things that God gives us all the time that we take for granted. Because like it is, I heard yesterday in the news, a commentator said, good news isn't news. What a tragedy, what a travesty. What a distorted sense of what's real. Psuka de Zibra is seeing all the wonderful things Hashem gives us, so you should push it like Him. Not like Him because you're an idealist and you're an intellectual. You like Him because you like yourself. It's as simple as that. But that's the second rung of the tefillah. The third rung of the tefillah is called the intellectual rung. Engaging with God using your mind to understand. And I'll get back to that momentarily. The final rung of the tefillah is to be as a servant in front of his master. To stand in front of God and be totally humbled, totally quieted. And that's the Amidah. That's the Shmoyne Esser, the prayer, the 19 blessings that we say with our feet together. You know, we make the 3 steps back and the 3 steps forward, as I've described it to you so many times. The idea of Shmoyne Esser is, I am now in a space where I'm feeling the presence of Hashem so holy that I can't even talk. I tell Him, Hashem, you help me speak. Here in the Tanya, the Alter Rebbe, and so let me just finish the thought. As time passed and people's sensitivity declined, it simply took more time to actually go through these steps and experience them. So they stretched the Siddur. They added more pages, not that we should read more, but that we should think and feel. The Siddur is bigger because you have more time to meditate on each one of these 4 rungs. The rung that's connected to submission and acceptance, the rung that's connected to experiencing gratitude for God because of what He provides for us materially, the rung that is about us engaging intellectually, and then of course the final step, standing in His presence. The davening is longer because we need more time to get to the same end. You know, if you can reach God in 2 seconds, that's fine. But if you need 2 hours, you better find the time because it's very important. And that's the model of davening. Assume.
More time than what?
Than they needed years ago, in an earlier time. So the Alter Rebbe focuses in on the Shema. And he says, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. A Jew tells himself, Chveisvas, Yehuda, Tzvi, Yosef, Meir. Pay attention, Hashem Echad. God is my master, and He's the master of my world. And He even is the master of Obama. He's even the master of Obama. Mamish. Unbelievable. Whether Obama admits it or not is a different issue, but that's his problem.
You'll find out later. Don't worry.
He says, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad is a declaration of the unity of God. But this is not a philosophy, although it is a philosophy. We intellectually understand the connection between creator and creation. Not the disconnect. Not the idea, He made the world and He's gone off to create other universes. But the intimate involvement of God in His creation. And that intimate involvement of God in His creation is the reality of the creation itself. And we follow up Hashem Echad with the words, V'yohavta. I love and I'm going to give. B'chol avavcha, those things that I love. B'chol nafshecha, my life. B'chol meidecha, my wealth. I'm going to squeeze myself in these areas because Hashem has squeezed Himself to create us. It's very powerful. It's incredibly powerful. But the Alter Rebbe says you need to be in a certain frame of mind, certain mood, certain state of existence in order to say it and mean it and be there. So the Chazal were misaken what's called Birchis Kriya Shema. The Shema has blessings. Now everybody knows what a blessing is. Baruch Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam. So on. The blessings of Shema are 3 pages and then another 3 pages. They're huge. They're lectures. They're not blessings, they're speeches. And more than anything else, they're totally irrelevant. Most people don't even know that they're called the blessings of the Shema. You start reading the first blessing of the Shema, it has nothing to do with the unity of God at all. Even the second blessing of the Shema, it's just, speeches. The first blessing of the Shema, to cut to the chase, is about the angels. The second blessing of the Shema, to cut to the chase, is about God's love for us. And then comes the Shema, and of course, as we've discussed last time before Pesach, after the Shema, we follow it up with a huge discussion on the Exodus, and Yetzias Mitzrayim. And the Rebbe brings the Tshuvas Rashba, one of the great Rishonim, who asks the question, what are the blessings that do with the Shema? The blessings before the Shema are expose on angels. Srafim say Kaddish. Ifanim say Baruch. Who cares? There seems to be no connection between what's happening before the Shema and the Shema itself. Says the Alter Rebbe, you don't understand. Shema has a purpose. Not just to say, to close your eyes and there's no world and there's only God, and then to open your eyes and then God vanishes and the world reappears. You keep your eyes open and it's still Havaya Ha'aretz Umlayah, it's Hashem's world, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. You need to get to that space intellectually and emotionally. So you need to be charged up. And you allow yourself to get charged up by going through preliminary steps. The first preliminary steps is you talk about angels. What do we know about angels? Honestly, nothing at all. But let's not be honest, okay? Let's be experts. Angels are beings whose identity is ideas. There's no Hollywood in the world of the angels. There's no Florida in the world of the angels. There is God and His knowledge. Angels eat ideas the way we eat food. That's how they're nourished. That's how they stay alive. And what ideas are they studying? They're not studying mathematics. They're studying the ideas of Achdas Hashem. Classes of angels, categories of angels, and levels of angels, it's all a reflection of how much they're able to appreciate the greatness of God. That's what separates them. Higher angels know more, lesser angels know less, and some angels only know that they don't know. And their emotional reactions are consistent with their level of knowledge. Higher angels who know more, their emotions are quieter and deeper. Lower angels who know less, and the lowest angels who only know that they don't know, their reactions, their emotions are much more loud and demonstrative and tumultuous because it's an emotion that's coming from a lack. And in some Maimonides Hasidus, they'll point out that the Ifanim, the lowest angels, called Ifanim, in their tumultuous ignorance, in an ironic way, are closer to the truth than the highest angels who were in their quiescent engagement. Because, when you think you know God, you, at that moment, cease to know Him altogether. And we go through with this discussion on the angels to appreciate how much there is to appreciate. about the greatness of God. And that the Eibishter has for himself a whole hierarchy of worlds and levels and categories of angels who are all engaged in knowing Hashem. And parenthetically, you ask yourself, what does God need angels for? And of course, as a good Jew, you answer a question with a question. If you can tell me why God needs us, I'll tell you why God needs the angels. And of course, when it comes to us, we use such terms as free will and struggle and partnership and creativity. God needs angels, not for himself. God needs angels for us. Angels' loyalty to God is God's advertisement. The fact that around God, the Tanakh describes in Sefer Melachim, Eliyahu Hanavi has a vision. The prophet Elijah has a vision. And the vision has stages. There's a ruach, a twister, a volcano. What's a twister called?
A tornado.
A tornado. This is all, of course, this is a prophecy. And then there's a rash. Rash means an earthquake. And then there's an eish. I presume that an eish means an eruption, a volcano. And of course, this is a vision that Eliyahu Navi is having that's metaphysics, right? The tornado represents a certain force of godliness. The tremor, the earthquake represents a higher force of godliness. The fire, the volcano, a higher force of godliness. And Eliyahu Navi says, there was a ruach, there was a volcano, Loi beruach Hashem, God was not in the volcano. V'achei ruach rash, after the volcano, after the tornado, there was a earthquake. Loi berash Hashem. V'achei rash eish, then there was a volcano, there was a fire. Loi be'eish Hashem. V'achei eish, koil d'mamadak. And after the fire, there was an inaudibly silent voice. That was God. So what do you need to have the tornado and the earthquake and the volcano? Because they announce God to such deaf people like ourselves who can't pay attention to the silence because they're so busy making noise. The Eibush has angels. The angels are, their entire identity is worshiping God, but they make noise. And the noise that they make gives us an awareness, not of God, but of the awareness of God. And then you pay attention to what the angels are saying. And we do this every day in the morning. And we do this whenever we say Kedusha. This is one of the most powerful parts of our prayer. And I will propose to you that this is one of those pieces of the prayer that's so incredibly powerful and so few people pay attention. The Kedusha that we say Shabbos and Yom Tov, more than the weekday Kedusha. The Malachim, the angels tell one another, where is he? We're so busy looking for him. The angels are talking to each other. We're so involved in the passions associated with him. But where is he? Or to use the contextual term, where is his quiescence? And the answer is, we're busy making noise, and he's in a shtibel in Brooklyn. Where is the Eibishter? Ayitut HaMitzvah. So before we get to ourselves, we talk about the angels. And I think we can all agree that we're not angels. I'm willing to admit that. Some would say, I don't want to be an angel. In Chassidus, you learn a human being is higher than an angel. But it's not so easy. And the angels, you read about the angels, this is not history, this is not social studies, this is not knowing the secrets of God's creation. This is making Hashem relevant to ourselves. So you begin the Birchas Kishma with an expose on Malach. What are you thinking about? What are you meditating upon? What are you focusing on? Angels are incredible. Yeah, their whole world is ideas. And their whole lust, their whole hunger, their whole desire is for God. And what do the angels say? The angels say, I don't know why, and I don't understand why, but this is the fact. He favors those jinn, those physical creatures with all their weaknesses, and all their compromises, and all their inexactnesses, and they matter. And then you follow that up with Ava Selam Aftanu, with the second blessing of the Shema. The second blessing of the Shema, you're talking about Neshamas Yisrael. The first blessing of the Shema talks about the angels. In the morning you have a long version. In the evening, we're going to daven Ma'ariv soon, yeah? You have a short version. The second blessing of the Shema is the Eibishter's love for Klal Yisrael, the Eibishter's love for us, for Yidden. And we begin with the words Chemla Gedela V'Yeseda. There's a great and overflowing Chemla, love, that He has for us. Says the Alter Rebbe, what does it mean Chemla Gedela V'Yeseda? For reasons that we'll never be able to explain, He favors us over the angels. Apparently God doesn't like people who are perfect, but for whom it is easy. He likes the struggle. And it makes sense, it's logical. And He loves us. And we're important. And the Alter Rebbe goes through this Avasela, line by line, in the Tanya, chapter 49. He goes through a number of different passages in this prayer and explains how each one communicates this favoritism that the Eibishter has for us. Hashem has chosen us from all the nations. And he says in one of the most powerful points he found all over the Tanya, we talk about in Judaism this concept of Hashem having chosen the Jewish people. And there's a lot of philosophy about choice. But here in Tanya chapter 49, the Alter Rebbe makes one of the most important revelations about choice. Is the choice in the Jewish nation was the choice in the Jewish body, not in the Jewish soul. Because the Jewish soul is self-chosen. It's a special soul. The Jewish body is ordinary. There's no difference between a Jewish body and a non-Jewish body. Hashem chooses a Jewish goof not because it's special, because He decided. And why has the Eibishter chosen us? That we should say, we should declare, and of course, we should mean it. Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Not that God is one and now I'm going off to vacation. God is one and I'm a part of that unity, and my life has to reflect it. Says the Alter Rebbe, if we just woke up in the morning and said, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, many of us would just miss it. Why? Because we wouldn't show up. So the tziddur has been stretched. And we had a huge exposé on Malachim. Then an involved discussion on Hashem's favoritism for Klal Yisrael. What's happening is we are focusing. We're getting into it slowly. So that when you get to the Shema and you say, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, it's much more than words. As I said before, you announce the unity of God. You follow that up with the Ahavta, with a preparedness to squeeze oneself, b'chol avavcha, to give God those things that I love, b'chol nafshcha, to give us God our lives, b'chol medecha, to give God our wealth. But it's not finished. No, if I'm prepared to squeeze myself and give God the things I love, give God my health, give God my life, my wealth, so how am I going to do it? And the answer follows immediately thereafter. Learn Torah. The Gemara says, the answer to giving of ourselves to God is to do what He says, to study His Torah and to do His mitzvahs. He brings, when you love somebody, you want to hug them and you want to kiss them and you want to join spirits. He says, we discussed this in earlier chapters. He doesn't mention it here, but in chapter Vav and Memhei, he said, hugging the Eibishter is mitzvahs. Kissing the Eibishter is learning the Torah. And our spirit and His spirit joining is experiencing the Eibishter through the engagement of our mind and our heart. Through Yiddishkeit, we have this relationship with David. Through Yiddishkeit, we are squeezing ourselves reciprocally for the so-called squeezing that He has done to create us, to show this gratitude, to, so to speak, give back to Him what He has given us. And the Alter Rebbe says, and when we learn Torah and we do mitzvahs, there's a unique emphasis. And the unique emphasis is that we do physical actions and we say physical words. And one of the weird things that you discover as you become frum is that reading something doesn't mean looking at it, it means saying it. It's one of the strangest transformations you have to make. When you become a Yid, Rabbi gives you a book and says, read it. So you look at it. No, read it. I'm reading it. No, read it. I'm reading it. Read it with your lips. Okay? I'm going to say the word, I'll say the word. We have to say the words. Why? Because it's about the action. Just as God favors us over the angels and we're at the bottom of the barrel, Hashem favors action. Physical deed. And also, when you study the Torah, you don't just think it and meditate on it, you say it with your lips to bring it down to the lowest madrega. Why? Because as we have discussed at length in earlier discussions, Hashem wants us to bring Him to the lowest level. We bring Him to the lowest level through the things that we do, the things that we say, and the things that we think. However, you need to have a Ratzah V'Shuv. Ratzon v'shuv means that every life that's a successful life needs a certain tension, a certain metach. You need two poles. One pole, one priority is to practice Torah and do mitzvahs. And the other pole and the other priority is to want God. Because if you don't want God, your mitzvahs become soft. And if you don't do mitzvahs and you only want God, you want them and you're never going to have it. This is called the Ratzon v'shuv. Wanting God is called the Ratzon, running towards Him. Shuv, physically doing mitzvahs, physically saying words of Divrei Torah, bringing Hashem into this world, is His interest in our relationship. So it's this combination. So we begin with Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, which is called the Mesiras Nefesh. I'm giving myself away to Hashem. And the way I practically translate that interest of Liachetcha, of the unity of God, is by bringing the Eibishter into this physical world. The choice is, what Hasidim call to serve Hashem. To serve Hashem doesn't mean to be frum. Of course you're going to keep Torah mitzvahs, but to do it with awareness. Every generation, every time has its avodah. You're expressing what you just described is by being makad of another yid. Giving of yourself to somebody else, which you don't want to do. That in a small way. The Rebbe will tell you the only reason you have a job is to meet so and so and to talk to them about such and such. Why? Maybe she can give you parnasa if you don't work?